Today we're fortunate to have Fred Stella come back and share a message with us. And every time Fred comes, I learn a little more about him. And I'm going to read some things in his bio that I didn't know Fred did, of all the many things he's done. But he started his spiritual search within the Hindu tradition when he was 15 years old. And now his training includes time spent in temples and ashrams both here and in India. He's ordained as the outreach minister for the West Michigan Hindu Temple, and he's also president of the Interfaithly Dialogue Association and hosts its weekly radio program, Common Threads, on WGVU.
Well, good morning and namaste. This is one of the perfect germ-free salutations that you can give someone. It's actually approved by the CDC. Well, actually, probably the most important thing that I can share with you today, right now, what you will leave with and be inspired for the next week or so, is that my wife is returning to this pulpit. I believe it's next week. Am I right? Okay, thank you. 2 weeks. I don't know what her life is like. I suspected that after you all had her here in November, that the attitude was going to be Fred who from that point on. So I'm really touched that you've decided to invite me here again. I know it was out of pity, but I appreciate the gesture anyway. I also want to plug something of her. I'm very, very proud of my wife, as you might have known. I tend to bring her up in my messages from time to time. Her one-woman show, Warm Cheese, is a spiritual experience. I don't know. I saw her video from that time, but I don't think she mentioned it. And actually, at the time, I don't think she knew that she was going to be doing this back in November. But she's going to be having 2 performances at Fountain Street Church, May 8 and 9. Nudge her to tell you about it when she comes in 2 weeks. Warm Cheese is a deeply profound one-person performance. She's performed it over the past 10 years, both here and in Los Angeles. And in October, she was invited to perform it at what is called the United Solo Festival. The United Solo Festival is the largest, most prestigious one-person performance festival in the country. And the A-listers perform at this. People such as Billy Crystal and Cynthia Nixon, a variety of people from New York and Los Angeles perform at this. And last October, Teresa was invited to perform it. So we both went there. And I had no idea that it was any sort of competition. I just thought people were performing for the love of it. But a month afterwards, we found out that out of over 120 performer authors, Teresa won the award for Best Script for Warm Cheese. Okay. So she hit the big time. And, if you can make it there, you can make it in Grand Rapids. We hope. So anyway, enough of that. But trust me, if you have the notion on either May 8th or 9th, Fountain Street Church, this is a very, very powerful feat, a powerful performance, and it's very poignant. But it is very, very funny. So, enough on that. So let's talk about what the sign says outside. Let me relate to you something that happened to me. So I have been guest speaking at Unity churches here in the area for several years now. As you know, I've been here for several years. I've also been at the Unity in Douglas, and just about a month and a half ago, I think, I was at the Unity in Muskegon for the very first time. And I love coming to Unity churches. I really do. Well, I was at the Unity on Walker a couple of years ago, guest speaking, and at the fellowship time, I was speaking to a woman who was in charge of scheduling the guest speakers. And at that time, I'd been there, half dozen to a dozen times. And she said, when we first reached out to you to ask you to be a guest speaker, someone on the committee was a little concerned. He said he didn't know if it was appropriate for a Hindu to speak at a Unity church. And I don't know what all went on, but in the end, the consensus was that yes, we should invite Fred. And so from that point on, I've been a guest speaker, and one of the things I've enjoyed sharing with you is the similarities between the Unity philosophy and the Hindu philosophy. And then I thought to myself, I'm going to do some digging, because I know that way back when, in the early days of Unity, there was some influence, but I didn't quite know how the influence got in. So, did some homework, and I'm here to share my homework assignment with you. I want to look back, if you will, to your founders, the Fillmores. As you might know, Myrtle Page was her maiden name. She suffered from tuberculosis, and Charles had a problem with his hip. He broke his hip skating one time. He ended up with one leg shorter than the other. And they started searching for more untraditional, if you will, methods of healing, and they became involved with the Christian Science movement. And they married at some point. They attended lectures by a former student of Mary Baker Eddy. And Myrtle wrote at one point, "I awakened to the truth that God is my Father and that I inherit from Him only that which is good." So the Christian Science movement, if you're not terribly familiar with it, they have a philosophy of divinity. They have a philosophy, a theology of Jesus that is very similar to Unity's. But there was something about the Christian Science movement that didn't entirely fulfill the Fillmores. So they moved on from that. But here's what you may not know. In Mary Baker Eddy's seminal book on health and science, in the original editions, there were quotes from Hindu scriptures. And up until the 33rd edition of that book, those quotes remained. And then, and this is of course many years after her death, they were expunged by her spiritual heirs. They decided that those quotes were a little bit too much of a walk on the wild side for white Christian America. So they just, poof, just disappeared. The philosophy, of course, was maintained. But any notion that there was a similarity in the understanding of divinity and humanity between Hinduism, those heathens over there, and the Christian Science movement, they just didn't want to draw attention to that. But then again, Charles was specifically enthralled by the Transcendentalists. And you may remember the Transcendentalists of Emerson, Thoreau, Whitman, if you will, Emily Dickinson, those philosopher poets who drew so much from the Hindu scriptures that were coming into the United States translated in the earlier part of the 19th century. Now, according to religious historian Neil Vale, the Fillmores looked to Emerson as their primary source. He says, there are more references to Emerson in the writings of the Fillmores than anyone else. And because Emerson was such a devotee of the Hindu scriptures, particularly the Bhagavad Gita and also the Upanishads, the Fillmores started reading the Hindu scriptures themselves. When asked by author Phil Goldberg about the influence of Hinduism on the Fillmores, Vale stated, listen to this, I would say that it was equal to that of Jesus. Think of that. That the Hindu scriptures were as important to the Fillmores as were the teachings of Jesus. The couple began their healing ministry in 1889 under the rubric Society of Silent Help, name changed several times, now best, of course, known as Unity Church. And Charles said, we have borrowed from the best of all religions. That is the reason we are called Unity. The Fillmores held that traditional Christianity tragically misinterpreted its founders' teachings, distinguishing between Jesus, the human and master teacher, and the Christ, or the Christ consciousness, an all-pervading spiritual energy, sometimes defined as divinity within, that more closely resembles Brahman, a concept that I've shared here before, than any embodied savior or tradition. According to Unity, God is spirit, the loving source of all that is. God is the one power, all good, everywhere present, all wisdom. God is divine energy, continually creating, expressing, and sustaining all creation. In God we live and move and have our being. And each person is a unique expression of God, created with sacred worth. Living from that awareness transforms our lives and the world. Now, because of such beliefs, the church has been excoriated as a New Age cult. I'm sure you've heard that. And you know, the Baptists call you Hindu light anyway, so. One Catholic leader said the Hindu might feel more at home with Unity books than Christian books because of Unity's belief in reincarnation. And just think by that statement alone, he's saying that he's not calling you, he's calling you something other than Christian, which I believe you are Christian. The Vedic influence on Unity's origins is evident in the second issue of Modern Thought. That's the magazine that ultimately became Unity Magazine. The issue contains an essay by Charles Fillmore that opens with all 4 stanzas of Emerson's poem, Brahma, calling the East the storehouse of a spiritual life that we cannot adequately comprehend in our present material thought environment. Fillmore offered a critique of religion that would surely have made him a pariah if he wasn't one already. The Christian religion has answered our needs up to the present age, but the evolution of spirit has created a demand for a religion of broader scope. And we turn to the lore of India for lack of a better system nearer home. He extolled the Orient as the nursery of spiritual philosophies, even speculating that the Bible is partially of Oriental origin. Fillmore's essay contains a remarkable early expression of Vedantic pluralism. For those of you who may have missed one or two of my messages or don't remember, there are multiple scriptures within Hinduism, and the foundational scriptures are called the Vedas, and there are 4 of them. So when you hear the word Vedic or Vedantic, we're talking about anything that pertains to those books. So he says that Fillmore's essay contains remarkable early expression of Vedantic pluralism, meaning, but we are all of one God, and it matters not from what source we get our religion, if it has the spirit of love and charity which pervades the souls of all who find a place of peace which passeth understanding. References to Indian philosophy virtually disappeared from Unity publications, similar to what happened with Christian Science, presumably to make the church's message more palatable in the heartland. That would make the Fillmores forerunners of many teachers who have borrowed Vedic ideas, but other people downplayed their roles. Their message was very Upanishadic. There's another word for you. The Upanishads are part of the Vedas in the similar way you might say that the Torah is part of the Bible. The Gospels are part of the Bible, where the Upanishads are part of the Vedas. So, their message was very Upanishadic, but their language was not. And this is an observation from Reverend Marge Britt. She's the former senior minister at Unity of Tustin, California. Instead of Tattvamasi or Aham Brahm Asmi, what we would refer to the mantra or doctrine, we would say is Aham Brahm Asmi. Divinity and I are one. Someone in Unity might say, I am an expression of the divine presence. There really is no difference between this and that. Despite the whitewashing, the Fillmores must have grown familiar with Vedantic teachings as they became more accessible. They seem to have attended Swami Vivekananda's celebrated appearance at the Parliament of World Religions in Chicago of 1893. This was a seminal event in Hinduism in America. This was the first time that a Hindu teacher appeared before a huge crowd and really introduced Hinduism to America on a vast scale. There were Hindu teachers prior to Swami Vivekananda, but that one event, the Parliament of World Religions in 1893, really brought the message of the Hindu Dharma to the United States, because you had a gathering of the major religious figures in America at that time. And you know something, this is very interesting. All of the sources that I looked at, I could not get a guarantee that the Fillmores were at the Parliament of World Religions and saw Swami Vivekananda. It seems like they may have. And lo and behold, I gave this same message, or a similar one, at Unity in Douglas just last month. And someone told me that they inherited some very, very old Unity magazines from this era. And it talks about seeing Swami Vivekananda. So I need to get a hold of a copy of that magazine. Charles at one point began sitting in silent meditation every night. And in the book American Veda, where I get a good deal of this information, it stated that after exploring different styles of meditation, he concluded that the meditative practices of the Eastern practitioners, particularly Hindu meditators, were more effective than practices taught in the West. In 1929, Charles wrote about Indian adepts who intoned sacred sounds, now commonly called mantras. Silent meditation became central to the teachings of Unity. So, after sharing all of this with you, one side of me wants to just say, you're welcome. But the other side of me wants to say thank you. Because over the decades, throughout so much of the 20th century, now into the 21st century, Unity has been a tremendous ally, not just to Hindus, but people of minority religions all over the country. And the relationship between many Unity churches across the country and Hindu communities, now, we're talking about specific Hindu temples or smaller gatherings, has been profound. Unity has welcomed Hindu speakers all over. I know, for instance, that you all, for a time, fairly recently, were renting your space out to a Hindu group for their functions here. Huh? You still are? Excellent. You can't go to a Baptist church and do that. All right? That's wonderful. And when it gets right down to it, it doesn't matter what you call it. The philosophy, the theology is the same, or at least very similar. Now, if you were to go to the Hindu temple, and I know several of you have been to the Hindu temple, if you were to go to our temple and experience a ceremony that we might have, it would be very foreign. It would be in Sanskrit. You probably wouldn't resonate with it. Maybe you would. I shouldn't be presumptive. But it wouldn't surprise me if many of you would not. So there needs to be a Western expression of what we call Sanatana-Dharma. I've used that expression before, Sanatana-Dharma. It simply means the eternal way, the eternal religion. And the eternal religion, the eternal way, does not have a prescribed set of practices, a prescribed set of how to do religion. The very basics are simply that there is one power, there is one presence, and that we are not separate from that presence. That's it. That's it in a nutshell. And from that point on, you can develop your liturgy, you can develop your personal practice, you can develop anything as long as it does not violate that key belief. And, of course, what's even more important is when we turn that belief into actual conviction, actual knowledge. Right? Somebody can come in here and hear myself or somebody else talk about us being one with God. And they walk out of here and, well, I think I believe that. Yeah, we're one with God. And then next week they go to a different church and they'll say, no, we're not. We are something other. We are apart from God. We are separated from God. And they'll believe that if it's delivered in a logical and reasonable way. So beliefs are transcend. What the Sanatana-Dharma, whether expressed through unity or through Hinduism or Buddhism or whatnot, what that calls us to do is through spiritual practice to transcend belief to actual experience. In the same way that I cannot talk you out of your existence. I can't convince you, no matter how good I am as a debater, I can't convince you you do not exist. The goal is to reach that point where you cannot be dissuaded from your divine origins. With that, I leave you. Let us continue to hold the most positive thoughts possible and express our compassion for those who are ill. And as was stated here earlier, we'll make it through. God bless you.
Thank you, Fred. Now's the time where we can give thanks for the blessings that we have, and we do that in the form of our offering. Would you join me in our divine love through me? All that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive.
And now, in honor of St. Patrick's Day, it's not that easy being green, having to spend each day the color of the leaves, when I think it could be nicer being red or yellow, gold, or something much more colorful, like that. You know, it's not easy being green. It seems you blend in with so many other ordinary things. And people tend to pass you over because you're not standing out like sparkles in the water or stars in the sky. But green is the color of spring. And green can be cool and friendly like. And green can be big like an ocean, or important like a mountain, or tall like a tree. You know, when green is all there is to be, it could make you sit and wonder why. But why wonder? Why wonder why? I'm green, begorra, and it'll do fine. It's beautiful, and I think it's what I want to be.
That's great. Thanks. We talked about blessings and things we're grateful for, and we also should think about not wasting some of those things that we are thankful for. And every week I think most people enjoy our donuts out there. And we have a lot of donuts that we don't eat. And as of today, I have no other place to take the ones that are left. So there's plastic bags out there, and if you have any desire yourself for some, or you know somebody else that might benefit from them, please take all you want, because otherwise I've got to throw them away. Would you stand and join me in the prayer for protection? The light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, the presence of God is within us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.